Okay, so we are fully into the conference. Some quick notes here. All right, so this is our third annual Hack the Capital conference. I want to say thank you, first of all, to all of the experts that have preceded the village and helped make the ICS Village what it is. I also want to thank my co-founder, Tom Van Norman, who is the technical rock behind everything we do. We have had a fantastic number of volunteers from Liz Wharton, Spencer Stuckey, Joel Charlotte, Aaron Rohn, Liz Newberry, Jessica Sluss, and Jonathan Payton, who are helping make this really great. From a logistics perspective, just a reminder, not all talks across the 3 tracks that are available will be taking questions. For those that are, though, the Q&A in your app chat are how you will get to them, and the moderators will do the best that they can to get those questions answered. If you need any help, please send a message to helpdesk@cyberbytesfoundation.org. And all talks will be recorded and posted to the ICS Village YouTube. So there is a lot of content. There is a lot going on. Track 1 is going to be numerous panels of various experts from across the spectrum talking about different things. Track 2 is going to be deep dives on specific events. And then we're going to have some demos and some additional bonus features in track 3 throughout the day. For those of you who have not seen the schedule, you can check it out on the icsvillage.com webpage. And so up next, we are joined by Mark Weatherford. Mark is currently the Chief Strategy Officer and on the Board of Directors at the National Cybersecurity Center. He is a founding partner at Aspen Chartered, where he provides cybersecurity consulting and advisory services to public and private sector organizations. He has held a variety of executive level cybersecurity roles, including he was the Chief Security Officer at the North American Electric Reliability Corporation, the Chief Information Security Officer for the state of Colorado, California's first Chief Information Security Officer, and then he was appointed by the Obama administration as the Deputy Undersecretary for Cybersecurity at the Department of Homeland Security, which is part of why I invited him on here this morning, because I thought it'd be really interesting to talk to one of the founding fathers of how we look at domestic cybersecurity and industrial control systems here in the country. The final part that I think is also really neat is he helped establish the Navy's first Red Team. Mark, welcome.
Hey, Bryson.
Really appreciate you being up bright and early. I'm calling all the way from the other coast to join us this morning.
I'm happy to be here.
So, Mark, I mean, from what you've seen at the beginning, all the way to the way things are now, what do you think? What were the assumptions that we had back then that have changed, and what would you think about we should do now?
Boy, that's about as broad of a question as you could possibly ask me. So let me go back. You know, I joined DHS and in 2011. I came in following Phil Reitinger and Greg Schaefer, who had done an amazing job setting the program up at DHS. But we were struggling at the time organizationally because we were part of a larger organization called the National Protection Directive, NPPD, and so we were one component of many components within NPPD, and actually Suzanne Spalding, who was also there at the time, you know, one of her missions after she became the undersecretary was to create a separate organization for security, for cybersecurity. And that's what Chris Krebs leads at DHS now, the CISA organization. So, you know, I would say that, you know, 2011 to 2013, when I was there, it was kind of difficult to get oxygen. There were a lot of things going on. I mean, we were still recovering from, recovering is the wrong word. We were still dealing with the fallout of Stuxnet, which had happened in 2010, and then in 2012 we had the Operation Ababil, which was the DDoS events against all of the banking infrastructure in North America. So, you know, to put it in perspective, my role at DHS was, I really had kind of two primary responsibilities. One was working with all of the civilian federal agencies. This is the non-DoD, non-intelligence community organizations, all of the civilian agencies in the .gov environment to help them protect their organizations. But more importantly to me anyway, was working with all of the critical infrastructures in the nation, the 16 defined critical infrastructures. Spent most of my time, probably obviously, with oil and gas, electricity, water, telecom, and healthcare was growing. But I probably spent the most of my time working with electricity and oil and gas companies and having just come from NERC, you know, where I worked with the electricity industry, it was kind of made sense for me to, because I knew where all the warts were. And so I could figure out where, you know, the buttons to push and where the funding needed to go and where the right kind of support needed to go. And plus we had, we just had such amazing people at DHS at the time. Marty Edwards was running the ICS cert. And so Marty and I worked pretty closely together on a variety of different things. You know, he set up and ran the ICS training program at Idaho National Labs. And so, you know, so it was kind of it was disorganized, but it was a lot of people with a lot of focus on making the organization better. So fast forward to where we are today, you know, Chris Krebs now, and you know, as the congressman just said, I think one of the best things that Congress has done in the past 5 years is to say, okay, CISA, you are your own entity within DHS. So they've got funding, they've got the infrastructure around CISA now to be a standalone organization with all of the responsibilities for focusing on cybersecurity. And you know, Chris Krebs is doing a fabulous job there. He's just doing an amazing job bringing together all of the things in an environment, by the way, where, as we know, the threats have not gone away. The threats have changed in many ways. And, you know, he's dealing now with things that we were worried about, but they weren't top of mind, like election security. You know, election security is one of CISA's, you know, biggest focus areas right now, and rightfully so. But at the same time, they're still working with all of the critical infrastructure organizations around their control systems and ICS security. So I don't know if I'm answering your question, but I'm just kind of rambling a little bit. But you know, I would say the organization at DHS has changed a lot, and a lot more needs to be done. I do think that as the congressman said, CISA now has the responsibility. When I was there, it was kind of divided. We were still having I would call it a little bit of a food fight between the FBI and NSA and DHS, is, you know, around who would own cybersecurity for the federal government. And, you know, I said all along, you know, no one wants the military to own cybersecurity. The military can't work effectively with the private sector as well as DHS can. So I think, you know, where DHS is right now, where CISA is right now, is they're at the creation moment, you know, where there's a great opportunity, as the congressman said, the great opportunity to move forward now and do really good things.
So what do you think about the recommendation that we have somebody that's essentially the head of cybersecurity in the federal government, the formerly known as the cybersecurity czar?
Yeah. Well, I think it needs to be done. It has to be done. It's like it maybe the most important thing that needs to be done. But I would say it needs to be, it's a policy role, not an operational role. You know, when I was at DHS, I worked very closely with Howard Schmidt and Michael Daniels, who were in that role at the White House, and we had a good relationship because we understood our roles. You know, mine was really operational. I was working with the people turning the knobs and twisting, you know, pushing the buttons every day, and their role was really around creating and crafting policy. Now, I had input into that, and they asked me for input into some of the sausage making that goes into developing policy, and I spent, you know, far more time on Capitol Hill than I ever knew was part of the job. Um, and I think that operational perspective input into the policymaking is critical. But we as a nation, I mean, come on, this is like one of the biggest threats to mankind, you know, security. We have got to have somebody at the White House, at the executive branch level, that's you know, kind of coordinating across all of the government and all of the private sector initiatives, but from a policy perspective. That's my opinion.
So going back to that initial role at DHS under the Obama administration, what's something that you wish that y'all had done differently? What's something that
Oh my
you?
gosh.
Yeah, I know it's the tough question, right? Like looking
No,
backward
it's easy
going,
question. It's easy. It's you know, there's so many things. I mean, so two things. One thing that we did really well, you know, through serendipity and a whole lot of things. The first person I hired at DHS was John Stroipert. I hired him away from State Department. And John had created a program at State Department to score risk for all of their embassies around the world. And it was phenomenal. And I said, John, I need you to come to DHS. I need you to do for the entire federal government what you've done for State Department. And we created a program called Continuous Diagnostics and Mitigation. And the whole purpose for CDM was that we would build an architecture of security products and services, and fast track them from an acquisition perspective and make them available to all federal agencies. Funny story is we originally were calling it the continuous monitoring program, but somebody on some legislator got wind of it and went ballistic. He thought we were, you know, he took the monitoring piece out of context and thought we were monitoring people. So we ended up changing the name to CDM instead of continuous monitoring. But so that's a program that still exists today. Federal agencies can take advantage of the procurement advantages of CDM. We're like 8 years into the program, and it's still not complete, which, you know, that's a little frustrating. But I would say, you know, regrets. A lot of I didn't realize the scope of my authority, I guess is probably the best way to do it. I didn't realize that, you know, I could have done a lot more than what I did. But one of the things that I really wish I would have focused more on was the ISACs, the Information Sharing and Analysis Centers. So in 1998, President Clinton signed PPD 63, which created the framework for these ISACs. And so every one of the critical infrastructures has a designated ISAC with their own designated government supporting organization. And one of the things that so, you know, part of my budget was I wouldn't call it discretionary, but, you know, I could make changes and move some of the money in my budget around a little bit. And we'd been providing the multi-state ISAC some funding for a number of years. And my biggest regret is that I didn't at some point say, wait a minute, let's take some of my DHS funding and start supporting every one of the ISACs, because while some of the ISACs are self-funding on their own, like the financial services ISAC, and the banking industry basically supports the financial services ISAC, but some of the other ISACs are, I guess they're just poor. They don't have any money, so it's hard for them to generate support within their sector. And if I was able to kickstart the ISACs with a little bit more funding, I think they would be further along than they are today.
So I'm gonna have to give a shout out at home to our informal industrial control system ISAC called the Beer ISAC, which is all about the community building that we have, where we share both expertise, and there are a number of international representatives who are part of that, which I think again speaks to the challenge and the way that we look at it from an expert level. And as Representative Mike Gallagher pointed out earlier, I mean, that international collaboration and the fact that these are not political questions. Yes. And so that's, I think, one of the biggest challenges that we've seen in the past couple of years is these kinds of issues and the things that we're talking about, while they were political within you, Mark, having to deal with the scope of your power, the authority, what you can do and couldn't do across multiple stakeholders. Now that political angle comes down to the debate of technical facts. And I mean, how would you feel operating in that environment now?
Well, I mean, I think the congressman's exactly right. This is I can't think of a more bipartisan, nonpartisan issue, that the nation faces today. And you bring up a good point, and that is, I work with a number of organizations around the world, both private sector and government organizations. We worked with one government, and they asked us to come in and give them kind of a roadmap for how we had built the security organization at NPPD, and after we'd done that, they said, hey, okay, we want you to build it for us here in our country. And I had to go back and say, that's not really what we do. We can give you the recipe, but you have to do the cooking yourself. So I think that we have made tremendous amount of progress, working on, again, keeping the politics out of it. But, security professionals, we get along pretty damn well. By ourselves. It's when you start adding the politics and some of the non-productive stuff in that you have those kind of food fights. And I think internationally we have pretty good relationships, mano a mano with our contemporaries in other nations. But it does get stuck in the mud occasionally when the politics come into it. And I've been fighting this battle, when I started in state government. The politicians want to use everything to make a political win, and I'm like, I'm not a political guy. I'm here to do my job, which is securing our organization. So, we'll never stop that. We'll never get around that. Politicians are going to use whatever avenue they can to boost themselves up, and I don't mind that, actually, if it can help us, if it can help move our security programs forward. If somebody else wants to take credit for it, that's great. I applaud them for doing that, but let's move the program forward.
So I'm afraid I'm not going to give you a magic wand like I did the representative, but I am going to offer you a crystal ball. Unfortunately, it has Bluetooth connectivity. And when you look into that crystal ball, in the next 5 years, what's one significant good thing and one bad thing that you think is going to happen?
Oh man, well, let me start with a bad thing. I think, I hate to pick out one of the bad things out of the many bad things that are potential, but I think ransomware is going to get worse. And I hate to say it, but it's almost the perfect crime. It's, it's easy to pull off, and it's almost impossible to get caught. And you know, while we hear about all of the high-profile events for the Fortune 500 companies, it's the small and medium-sized businesses that I'm most concerned about. And again, not even with ransomware, but with security in general. And you know this, your audience knows this, is that you know, small and medium-sized businesses simply don't have the resources or the you know, the technical acumen to understand the threat environment that they live in. So I worry about that. I mean, I mean, you know, a lot of my friends and companies that I talk to on a regular basis, literally, you know, they're waiting for that shoe to drop when they're the victim of a big ransomware event. So that's the bad. The good, I think, you know, we as an industry, technology is getting better. You know, I've been saying for years that you know, the technology that brought us an environment where we have all of these vulnerabilities is the same technology and technologists that are going to innovate our way out of this. I think, you know, not to jump on the AI ML bandwagon, but I think AI and ML have great potential for security to help us identify threats and vulnerabilities earlier that help us get in front of some of the problems. So I'm just a huge fan of technology. I think technology is going to is the one positive. It's going to help us innovate our way out of some of the problems we see today.
Well, Mark, very much appreciate your time this morning and helping set the tone, the context, and the history, as well as the predictions for the rest of the event today. So we're going to take a quick break, everybody, but please join us back in a few minutes. Our first panel in track 1 is going to be a panel on cyber education, moderated by Philip Niedermeyer. And track 2 will also be kicking off. And if you look over in track 3, we will be having a live demonstration shortly of the ICS Village range covering industrial control systems and Internet of Things, hosted here in the Stafford facility by the Cyber Bytes Foundation. Mark, thank you very much again for
Thanks,
helping
Bryson.
us.